Inhibited grief. After Daniel's wife passed away, he became obsessed with keeping everything in order. He cleaned the house obsessively, organized her belongings into neat boxes, and threw himself into work. Everyone admired his focus and discipline, but no one knew he hadn't allowed himself to sit down and feel. Every time a wave of emotion threatened to rise, he redirected his energy elsewhere. Months later, he began having panic attacks and frequent migraines. The grief he had pushed aside wasn't gone. It had gone inward. Welcome to this mini-series on understanding the language of grief, loss, and trauma. My name is Nathalie Himmelrich. I'm a somatic practitioner, psychological therapist, educator, and author, specialising in grief and trauma, and the host of the How to Deal with Grief and Trauma podcast. Grief and trauma are deeply human experiences, yet many of us struggle to describe what we are going through or to understand what others are facing. The vocabulary of loss is vast, varied, and sometimes overwhelming. In this short podcast episode series, we'll explore the different types of grief, loss, and trauma that people encounter throughout life. Each mini-episode serves both as an educational tool and a compassionate companion for anyone trying to make sense of their own experience with grief, loss, and trauma, or someone who is supporting someone else who is. These terms are more than labels. They are doorways into greater understanding, healing, and connection. Whether you are a bereaved parent, a caregiver, a therapist, or someone walking alongside a grieving friend or someone who has experienced trauma, these bite-sized episodes aim to give you language, insight, and tools. Each one includes a definition, some key considerations, an explanation of why it matters, relevant podcast episodes, and frequently asked questions that I have been asked by my clients and you, the listener of the podcast. And my answers are all grounded in both professional and lived experience. So let's begin. Inhibited grief refers to a form of grieving where emotional expression is suppressed or redirected. Instead of expressing sorrow openly, the bereaved might distract themselves with activities, intellectualize the experience, or avoid anything that might trigger strong emotions. Inhibited grief often manifests through indirect symptoms like chronic tension, headaches, digestive issues, insomnia, or irritability. It may not look like grief at all. People experiencing it might say, "I'm just trying to stay busy," or "I don't want to fall apart." This avoidance is sometimes unconscious, shaped by personality, cultural, gender expectations, or traumatic past experiences. Some other examples include a mother who avoids looking at any photos of her deceased child and pours herself into volunteer work instead. Or a man who lost his partner and immediately began dating again, never giving himself time to reflect. These are not signs of weakness. They're signs of someone trying to cope the only way they know how. So this is important to know because inhibited grief can delay healing or intensify emotional suffering over time. Because by not allowing grief to move through us, it can lodge itself in the body or surface unexpectedly, often years later. Recognizing inhibited grief helps individuals begin to safely explore their suppressed feelings and find ways to gently engage with their pain without being overwhelmed. It also opens the door for deeper self-awareness and lasting emotional integration. In many of the conversations I had for the How to Deal with Grief and Trauma podcast, interviewees refer to periods of inhibited grief as they felt they could not fall apart for the sake of their family members who depended on them. It is common, however, if the avoidance, conscious or not, is the main way to deal with grief, it can be detrimental for one's own health and therefore for the family members who depend on you. So you might have wondered exactly the same as this question. How is inhibited grief different from absent grief? So inhibited grief is often a conscious or semi-conscious effort to avoid emotions, while absent grief may occur without awareness. So both of those involve suppression, but inhibited grief may come with more internal conflict. So the next question is one that could be asked in many of the other episodes. So can grief really make me physically sick? Absolutely. Emotional suppression is linked to various physical symptoms, including fatigue, muscle pain, immune suppression, and anxiety-related issues. So if you're suffering of any of those symptoms, make sure you go and check them out with a medical doctor. Another question that I received is, why do I feel worse when I try to slow down? Many people use busyness to outrun painful emotions. So when the pace slows down, those feelings begin to surface. This is a common entry point to healing. And similarly, when you go on holidays and you become sick, it's because of the slowing down, then the body can actually bring up those things that have been hidden. Another commonly asked question is, how can I start to engage with my grief if I've been avoiding it? So I recommend start with a small, manageable step. For example, write a letter to the person you've lost. Talk to a trusted friend or therapist, a grief literature therapist, or spend quiet time with a photo or an object that reminds you of them. Support from a therapist is really helpful, and it can help you feel safe enough to go deeper and actually choose safe enough, small, manageable steps to not overwhelm your system. In relation to culture, another question that I've received is, what if I was raised to believe grief is a weakness? That is a very common belief that I have been hearing from clients or support people, and that belief can create a powerful emotional block. So learning to see grief as an act of love rather than weakness can help shift that perspective and allow healing to begin. Another question that I received was, is it bad if I didn't cry after the loss? So not necessarily. Everyone grieves differently. And so what matters is whether you've had space to feel and process your emotions in your own time and in your own way. As I said, I'll have another episode on the 2 different ways of grieving that are very common. So why do I feel numb instead of sad? As I said previously, numbness is a protective response. It may be your body's way of shielding you from overwhelming pain, especially if the loss was traumatic or came on top of other stressors. Next up, I'll be talking about ambiguous grief. So stay tuned. I hope this episode has helped you feel more grounded in the language of loss, grief, or trauma, and maybe even offered you some clarity, validation, or insight into your own experience or the experience of someone you care about. Grief and trauma are deeply personal, yet universal. When we can name what we're feeling, we take one powerful step closer to healing and the integration of our experience back into our life. If this series resonates with you, I invite you to keep exploring. You'll find more resources, courses, and ways to work with me at nathaliehimmelrich.com. And of course, you're always welcome to revisit any of the episodes whenever you need a gentle reminder that you're not alone. Until next time, take good care of your heart.